I spoke with Chris Taulbee's father at the scene, Jeremy Taulbee, and we had a conversation which led us to believe, hey, that Chris could be a part of this.
A 19-year-old man allegedly confessed to a brutal double murder, shooting his ex-girlfriend, beating her new boyfriend to death with a bat, and leaving their baby unharmed at the scene. But chilling details emerged after his arrest, including his father's critical role in the investigation and an alleged hauntingly calm confession. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, let's dive into this. We have a 19-year-old Kentucky man who is facing 2 murder charges after allegedly confessing to a brutal, let me say that again, brutal double homicide, gunning down his ex-girlfriend and viciously attacking and stabbing her new boyfriend. Those are the accusations. It is a crime that thankfully, I can't believe I'm saying, there's a thankfully here, but thankfully there was a baby nearby, left their baby completely unharmed. But what's the reality? Sadly, this baby, a 4-month-old boy, is now an orphan, police say. And this nightmare, according to police, began at around 2:31 a.m. on April 3rd after a 911 phone call came in reporting that 2 bodies were found at a Bourbon County home. And here's the thing about this. When Kentucky State Police Sergeant William Howard arrived at the crime scene that morning, an unexpected figure was already waiting. Apparently, Jeremy Taulbee, the father of 19-year-old Christopher Taulbee, the suspect in this case. And this chance encounter will prove very critical to the investigation because I want you to listen to what Sergeant Howard had to say at a court hearing.
So around 3 a.m., I received a call from the dispatch center that said that Bourbon County SO was requesting a assistant. I spoke with Chris Taulbee's father at the scene, Jeremy Taulbee, and we had a conversation which led us to believe, hey, that Chris could be a part of this.
Sergeant Howard recounted how Jeremy Taulbee quickly offered investigators critical background information, revealing his son Christopher's rocky history with 20-year-old Dixieana "Dixie" Brainard, the young woman who had been both Christopher's ex-girlfriend and the mother of his child. And Jeremy disclosed that his son's relationship with Dixie had been turbulent, constantly on again, off again. But then he apparently claimed Christopher had visited his home just the night before and apparently had stolen both cash and a handgun. And investigators believe that this was likely the same weapon that was used in the killings. Now, before we get any further into the case, and there is a lot more details we want to get into, I want to bring on back onto the program Colonel Alex Payne of the Bullitt County Sheriff's Office. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's good seeing you.
Good seeing you, sir. No problem.
Thoughts so far on what I've laid out?
Just another grisly double homicide in this case. And as you mentioned, thank God the small child is an orphan and not the third victim.
Yeah, because it could have ended even worse. When you're talking about somebody who's young like this, right, a 19-year-old suspect allegedly committing this type of violent double homicide, and we'll get into more details later, what are the immediate concerns that come to mind when you think about this?
Not just the age, it's the overall atrocity of this thing. I don't know that this type of evil has any prerequisites. I've seen this, unfortunately, before. People of this age, I've seen some younger, committing these types of crimes. It truly doesn't say anything good, about our society and the way people choose to use violence as a way of problem solving. And in this case, it was extreme violence.
Hey everybody, this is a Law&Crime legal alert. Did you know that children are being diagnosed with serious conditions like type 2 diabetes, a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and the research is potentially linking ultra-processed foods to all this? Yeah, well, Morgan & Morgan is stepping in to fight to hold these food companies accountable. With decades of experience fighting large corporations, they are ready to stand up for families who deserve justice. So if your child under 21 has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or fatty liver disease, then visit www.forthepeople.com/food or scan the QR code on screen to learn more. Do you think it was unusual that the defendant's father was there providing information to police?
No, as parents, and I think, any of us that, I myself, for example, I've raised 5 kids and I have 7 grandkids right now. You do the best you can and you pray and hope they turn out to be good human beings first and foremost. And, sometimes that doesn't happen. And the parents, still being good human beings, are there and fulfilling that role that, hey, they realize that, when a child has gone wrong, horribly wrong in this case, they're there to provide information that would that lead to an arrest.
I'm going to ask you a difficult question here, Colonel. What is it like responding to a crime scene where you have a homicide scene? And similar characteristics to this. I mean, again, we'll get into it. We're talking about one victim who was shot. We're talking about another victim who was stabbed and beaten. What is it like for law enforcement to respond to a scene like that?
Well, the first thing that we try to do is immediately detach our emotional selves and just look at it from and I don't want to use the word cold, but more of a logical step by step, almost a scientific type process, because we've got a job to do. We have to put together the pieces of this particular puzzle, no matter how grisly the scene might be. We have to do our jobs, and our jobs require that of us. The wrestling with what you see unfortunately comes later. That's what piles up on many, many first responders, over the years. These things that you'll actually respond to, that you'll witness, that you'll see, you'll hear, you smell them. It's just an assault, on the senses themselves. But while you're there, you've got a job to do, and you have to look at that through a very strategic eye. And emotion, gets in the way of that.
I understand that. It's tough. It's tough. I've spoken to other first responders and law enforcement. It's not an easy thing to do. And this is why you guys are the best in the business. I mean, it's incredible work you're doing. Let me ask you this. I mentioned the father. I mentioned the fact that it's being reported this gun was potentially taken away, was stolen from the family's residence. That seems very alarming. I don't know what the rules are, what the laws are in the state, but what advice would you give gun owners about securing firearms?
Well, that's one of the things about being a responsible gun owner, and something you should learn, when you take up the decision to become a gun owner. There's a lot of responsibility that goes with that. And part of that is learning how to secure that firearm to keep anybody else from accessing that except you or those people that you may want to have access to it. And if you skip that step or you even overlook it, we don't have crystal balls. We don't have magic 8 balls that, you can sit and shake and say, is anyone going to take my gun today, and wait on the answer. You have to take that initial step. You have to have the initiative to lock that thing away, and only you or those people you designate have access to it. And unfortunately, people will put guns everywhere and not in a secured manner. And a lot of people, something we run into here pretty much on a very regular basis, vehicles. There's another place they leave them. It's unbelievable, how people actually go in their parking lot, driveways, park in front of their homes, leave loaded weapons inside and expect that thing to be there the next day. Something we tell people here: don't ever leave anything inside your vehicle that you don't mind other people owning, because it literally takes seconds for them to bust windows and gain access to the inside of that vehicle.
Would a parent like this ever be held responsible, legally liable for what happened here? Or is it, we don't know all the circumstances by how the gun was obtained or whether or not it was actually the murder weapon here, but assuming it was, have you seen a case in the state where someone's held responsible like that?
Not to my knowledge here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I have seen things now, where that's sort of a growing trend in other places, where they have things in effect where the security of the firearm was actually taken into where that individual has some liability as far as what's happened. But I don't recall anything right now in the Commonwealth of Kentucky that just comes to mind.
I want to go back to this crime scene, okay? I want to explain what happened here. So as investigators processed this scene, they make this horrific discovery. So they end up concluding that 20-year-old Dixie Brainard was executed with a close-range gunshot to the head in the car in this pickup truck. Feet away, still strapped in the car seat, was the couple's 4-month-old son. Now, again, he was not physically harmed, but yes, he was apparently exposed to this entire violent episode. Now, according to the arrest affidavit that was obtained by WKYT, the investigator paints a chilling picture of this scene. Quote, the defendant shot her in the head, resulting in her death. And officers then say a second victim was left for dead in a nearby field, 24-year-old Charles Chuckie Callaway. The affidavit describes the brutal nature of this killing. The defendant stabbed the unknown male victim in the throat and subsequently struck him with a baseball bat, resulting in his death. And by the way, I used the word vicious before. This is vicious. This is vicious. And hours later, miles away in Carter County, WKYT reports that a homeowner called 911 to report a very disturbing sight. A naked man asleep in a damaged car parked in their driveway. The vehicle was apparently missing its driver's side door and had a flat tire. And when troopers arrived, they say they found the defendant, Christopher Taulbee, covered in blood, completely unclothed. And rather than resist, he apparently looked at the officers and allegedly uttered 5 chilling words, "I'll tell you what happened." And what followed was what police say, a calm, detailed confession. Investigators say Taulbee recalled his arrival near the Big Stoner Road home, finding Brainard and Callaway in the pickup truck, shot Brainard in the head. Investigators say he even admitted to vomiting immediately after the shooting. I'm not sure if they were able to collect evidence of that to corroborate his story. But when Callaway fled into the field, apparently Taulbee pursued him. The suspect told police that he stabbed him multiple times before retrieving a baseball bat to continue this attack. Colonel, back to you. When you hear this level of attack in what I think could arguably be a domestic violence sort of domestic violence kind of incident, does this strike you as different, or is this very consistent with what you've seen and in this manner of attack?
Well, what it tells me just right off the bat, that this attack was very, very personal to Taulbee. And the reason I say that is the methods and, more importantly, the distance that he wanted to commit this crime in. Close range, gunshot wound. He wants there to be no doubt to that particular victim that this is it for them. And he wants to see it. He's going to be so close. You know, he'll see the fear in their eyes or whatever reaction that poor young lady might have had in her last few seconds of life on this earth. And then, to be even more personal, then he chases a guy and uses a knife. And so a knife is as personal as it gets, because now you're going to wear that individual. There's no using a knife on somebody and not getting that somebody on you. That's just the way it is. And he wanted to literally feel, watch, hear everything there was going to be about that particular individual dying underneath his hand. And so it just screams, that the attacks on both these people were extremely, extremely personal. And then to come back, when he didn't finish the job with the knife and actually finish him off with a baseball bat. So he did not want this individual to go quietly into the night. He could have actually, taken the gun, shot it, ended it, probably been a grace, thing to do with this guy by that time, sitting there bleeding out from a knife attack. But instead, what's he do? He chooses another personal weapon, an impact weapon, a baseball bat, to finish the job. It's entirely personally brutal.
And I want to talk about that evidence, and I want to talk about that attack in a minute and how law enforcement are going to collect evidence here and get into more details about that. But just going back to him, found allegedly naked, covered in blood, damaged vehicle, what does that suggest to you?
Yeah, that's just the aftermath of his attacks. He was probably trying to get out of the clothes that I pretty much guarantee you were covered in blood from probably both of those attacks, and, covered to the point where, even with his clothes off, he's still covered in blood. Like I said, that's the aftermath of that up close personal attack.
Do you find it surprising that he allegedly confessed?
No, I've seen these things before. He accomplished what he set out to do, and that was kill those people. With his job being done, in his mind, there's nothing left for him to do. And it's not a smoking gun. There's no doubt, this guy did what he did. And so what use is there? He's not really trying to run. He's done. And, I've seen it before. Sometimes they just quit. They're done and give up like that. So it doesn't surprise me.
I didn't even get into what maybe is the most chilling revelation, was that Taulbee, in his alleged admission, said that after initially fleeing the scene, he deliberately returned with another person. Yeah, the arrest affidavit states coldly, after committing the murders, the defendant notified a witness of his actions, picked up the witness, and brought the witness to the scene. And that witness reportedly provided just horrifying details to police. Callaway was still alive, okay? Mm-hmm. This guy was still alive, despite being stabbed and beaten, still clinging to life. But according to this witness, it was sadly not for long. Because according to the affidavit, it reads, the witness stated to law enforcement that upon arriving at the scene, he observed the defendant strike the unknown male victim, who was still alive, numerous times in the head with a baseball bat. And by the way, talking about evidence, according to Lex 18, authorities found bloody clothes, a knife, a blood-stained baseball bat, all in the suspect's car too. Let me just stop there. Colonel, how do you process evidence like this? Collecting evidence like this, it becomes key, right?
Yes, and there again, there's where I talked about earlier, detaching yourself and doing your job. Well, here you're dealing with pathogenic material. You're dealing with bodily fluids. So as investigators, not only do you have to capture that particular scene in the different and various ways that we do that, but now you have to collect that evidence, and you need to be on your game, because there's certain ways that we have to do that with that particular type of evidence to keep ourselves and the people that are around us healthy, especially when you're, involved, that amount of blood or bodily fluids or things of that nature.
Now, this part's a little strange, so let me just clarify. Investigators, they believe that Taulbee later moved both of the victims' bodies inside the home. The timing surrounding that's kind of unclear. The specifics of it are a little unclear in reporting or in the affidavit. But Lex 18 reports that the bodies were just moved sometime after these people were killed, and that he also discarded the murder weapon, allegedly, that his father's gun along US 60 between Bourbon and Carter counties. Apparently still hasn't been found. Colonel, you have faith in that gun being found?
Well, I know the organization that's investigating this particular crime with the Kentucky State Police, and having retired from there, I feel very comfortable in saying they have an outstanding group of personnel at that agency. And if that gun can be found, they'll find it. And I'm sure they'll also do an outstanding job of putting this particular case together and being the best witnesses that they can possibly be for the prosecution.
It's important for a prosecution. You obviously don't need the potential murder weapon to secure a prosecution, but, to tie the gun to the shell casings, to the bullets, to the wounds, it definitely helps because obviously it could raise reasonable doubt for a defense attorney. But according to reporting from WKYT, Taulbee has pleaded not guilty to the murder charges, and following a hearing on Wednesday, Taulbee's case was sent to a grand jury, meaning the prosecution in this case is requesting for a jury to review the evidence, decide if there is enough tangible evidence to support the charges. Colonel, what does it suggest about a suspect's state of mind when they allegedly return to a scene with a witness after committing violent attacks like this?
Well, it's obviously probably somebody he thought he could trust, and he needed help, because now he has an area that contains 2 dead bodies, and there's a child there, and whether he remembers seeing the child or not. But I think it's just an attempt to try to clean up the mess that he's left behind. And fortunately, that witness was of sound enough mind to report what they reported to authorities.
It seems to me that maybe, if this is true, moving the bodies would have been a way to stage the scene. Is that a fair characterization, fair assumption?
Could be. Yeah, it could be. And, there's a lot of things, that, who knows really, what was going through that idiot's mind, when he was doing that type of stuff. But that could be one of the reasons, yes.
And what are we left with at the end, right? According to reporting from Lex 18, you have 2 families. They were once strangers, and now, unfortunately, they're united in their grief. You have Dixie's father, Daniel Brainard, cradled his grandson, vowed to reporters, quote, "We're not going to let her memory die in the way that he wanted her to go away." That's not going to be Dixie's story. Chuckie's brother, Tyler Norman, his rage was palpable because he said, if I could get my hands on him, I'd take him out myself. So Taulbee's now held on $2 million bond. He's awaiting trial. 2 families, they are left to pick up the pieces. They have to raise this small child now, and what they tell this child in the future is going to be a very difficult conversation. And by the way, I should tell you that Taulbee's also facing charges in Carter County because that's where he was arrested for several traffic violations, possession of marijuana, possession of drug paraphernalia. If convicted of the murder charges, yes, he could face life in prison. The one thing that I'm not sure about, Colonel, is whether or not the death penalty could be on the table and whether or not the prosecution could pursue that. What do you think?
Again, I'm not an attorney, but as far as a capital offense, I believe if the decision is made to pursue that channel, I believe, they have an opportunity to do so. It doesn't surprise me that he pleaded not guilty. That's pretty much par for the course, especially if public defender or whoever he has representing them. Again, in our system, it's, innocent until proven guilty, no matter how bad it may look, from the get-go. But that would be the normal response. And then to take that to a grand jury to get that indictment, handed down. And I'm glad to see the high bail, but my heart goes out to those families. I mean, there are so many victims in so many different places, and, they're left behind to carry on. I'll pray for them. And I mean, these people that commit these types of crimes, that just shows you the degree of selfishness. It's all about them and their particular feelings at the moment and the things that they decide to do to help in their minds, with those feelings. And he resorted to this type of brutality. It's a shame. I wish those families the best, and it sounds like they're doing the best that they can in order to cope.
Yeah, we're sending our hearts and prayers out to them as well. This is an incredibly difficult situation and a tragedy on so many different levels. It's difficult to even talk about what happened to these two individuals. And again, I keep thinking about what that conversation is going to be like when that child grows up. It's hard to fathom. Colonel Alex Payne, thank you so much for taking the time. It was great seeing you.
Yes, sir. You too. Take care.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.